Okay, so today I'm joined by Caroline Love. Caroline is the co-owner of Cake Room Hastings, which is a cafe in Hastings serving amazing cakes and delicious delights, as well as locally roasted coffee and kombucha. So welcome, Caroline.
Thank you very much.
So, Caroline, tell us a little bit more about Cake Room Hastings.
So it was started off in 2017 by the previous owner, and she sold it to us beginning of July. So we've been there for about 6 weeks, really. So yeah, it's all locally made sandwiches, cakes. I mean, it is obviously mainly cakes, being called the Cake Room. And then we do cocktails and ice drinks, specialty coffee that's comes from Brighton, kombucha that's made locally. So we try to get as much as we can sort of locally sourced.
Fantastic. And tell me a little bit more about why you started your own business. Why did you decide to go into business? And also a follow-on question to that is, why this particular business?
So I think it was probably something my husband was more not passionate about, but it's something that he's always wanted to do. He's an absolute coffee addict and, drinks it endlessly. And he's always wanted, to have his own cafe. And, I've sort of got into the swing of it with him from that, really. And yeah, so 6 weeks in, we're absolutely loving it. It's the place is fantastic. It's got a really nice vibe. We've got lovely, sort of loyal customers. And yeah, we're just really enjoying it.
And was having your own business something that you always wanted to do, Caroline?
No, I mean, there's always that fear factor, isn't there? That, you sort of think, yes, it would be lovely to do it, but then there's that, oh, can we? Or, are we good enough? All of that sort of thing. Uh-huh. And since we moved back we were living in Egypt and we moved back here about 3 years ago. Okay. And we were going to start off something. As soon as we got back, it all fell through at the last minute. We both got different jobs because basically we needed to earn money. But the dream has always been sort of loitering there. Yeah. And so we just decided to take the plunge. You only live once. You can stop being scared of doing it and just actually get on and do it. What's the worst that's ever going to happen? Yeah. Is we lose a bit of money, we have to resell the business. I mean, to me, that's the way you end up having to look at it. It's just like, what's the worst that's going to happen?
No, absolutely. And then I think there's a great book which is Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway.
Yeah.
I love that sort of that book and that sort of saying, feel the fear and do it anyway. Yes. And look, I think that's a great thing to do. Is we've always got to be aware of the consequences of things that might happen, but focus on the positives. Okay, yeah. Right. Yeah. We know that's...
And also stop listening to everybody to a degree. Yeah. Because that's what I certainly did. As I was, and everyone was like, oh, it's too risky, and oh, it's not the right, and in the end, you just have to say, I'm going to do it.
Yeah. No, exactly. And that's yeah, look, that's, I think, actually going for it, taking that action. There's a lot of people in this world that actually will talk about, I'd love to have my own business, I'd like to do it, but don't actually do it. And taking that first step, that action, is a great thing. And any particular reason why you chose Hastings as a location, Caroline?
Well, if I'm completely honest, which I'm a bit embarrassed to admit, but when I was sitting out in Egypt, I was pottering around, and in the background was, one of those programs, Escape 2 or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And I think the people were moving to Brighton, and they said that there was another area near Brighton that was cheaper and it was similar and blah, blah, blah. And that was actually St. Leonard's.
Okay.
And Khaled and I, my husband, we're both scuba divers. And so the sea was really important. Mm-hmm. And we always knew that if we, moved back here, we would want to live by the sea. And so that's pretty much what drew us here. And I love it. It's a fantastic area. Yeah. It's lots of small businesses. It's really welcoming. People can just be who they are. It's great.
Okay, no, and I agree. It's like, great location. So, Caroline, you in terms of your business, what's the main focus for it? Because there's quite a few cafes in and around Hastings. I think must be 70 plus sort of cafes. So what's the focus?
What makes us different?
Yeah.
So I mean, we bake everything we bake all the cakes and everything on site. They're not bought in. And I suppose we just try to lift it that little bit higher. So, the coffee's just a little bit better than, some of our surrounding, cafes. We try to just put that extra little touch. So if, I don't know, we're giving somebody a croissant, we warm it up and then we give them some berries and some, do you know what I mean? Just those little touches that we hope make a slight difference, and also try to be as friendly and welcoming as possible, because I think that's important if you go to a cafe.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think two great things that you've highlighted there, Caroline, is one, those little bit extras make a big difference. Yeah. They really do, and they shouldn't be underestimated. And secondly, particularly in the hospitality industry, service is everything. It absolutely is. And look, I was looking at the reviews on on the Cake Room at Hastings, and there's some great reviews there. And you got 5-star reviews on TripAdvisor, etc., which is great. So you're obviously doing some things really, really well. How does it feel when you get a review that isn't quite as good?
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of upsetting, but not because I'm upset with what they've written, but because I want them to have experienced something fantastic. Yeah. So I'm more upset with me or us if we've got something wrong. At the same time, I think you have to accept that you can't be everything for everyone. And there are some people that just aren't going to like what you have on offer. And that's absolutely fine too. Yeah. But if we get a bad review because we've done something wrong, then it upsets me in the nicest possible way, because I want to make sure it doesn't happen again, or you learn from it, or you try to make sure it doesn't reoccur.
Yeah, that's a great way of looking at it, Caroline. I mean, there's something that I coach my clients on, which is about being above and below the point of power. And if you're above the point of power, then you take ownership, you take accountability, and you take responsibility, which is exactly what you're saying you do for those reviews that perhaps weren't as good as the 5-star ones that you've normally been getting. The opposite to that is being below the point of power, which is actually blaming other people, you making excuses and being in denial. So that's fantastic what you're doing. You're being above that point of power, saying, right, okay, it's down to us. What do we need to change? How do we need to do things differently? What can we do better? So yeah, great approach.
Good.
I like it. So Caroline, in terms of your business, how would you like to be known in Hastings?
Best coffee shop around.
Right, okay.
And the best cakes, obviously.
Absolutely. So you want to be up there in terms of the
I want, we're lucky we have a good, strong, loyal customer base. You want to keep on improving that, but giving them what they want, but extending it and making it bigger.
Yeah. Okay. And do you have ambitions for growing Cake Room Hastings? Would you like to have other locations, or is it actually
I think we'd like to grow what we've got, in that one of the things that we're thinking about doing is a sort of grab and go type product, so that if people don't want to come in for a cake, they can get a takeaway and then just pick up something as they're leaving, that sort of thing. And also, one of the things that we've just introduced actually is a sort of savoury cheesecake. So to try and the difficulty is that you want to maintain the fact that you're the cake room and you know who you are, but we would quite like to just expand that offer a little bit, to maybe bring in people who, you know, cakes aren't necessarily their thing, or they might want something for lunch, you know, rather than having a piece of cake. And we do some fantastic sandwiches, but we just thought actually a sort of savoury cheesecake, it is, you know, quite a good thing to start offering, and it's gone down really well. Some people are a bit like, that's weird, but actually when they try it, you know, they've loved it.
I'm gonna have to pop along and try that now. So you've tempted me. Okay, so look, you're fairly early on in this business that you're in now. So what challenges have you experienced so far that perhaps you didn't expect, or indeed you did expect, and you know, and what have you done about those? How have you overcome them?
I suppose some of it was sort of just learning how the business goes and getting it up and running. Or, you know, I mean, the previous owner was very kind. She was very generous. We did a bit of a handover period, but that first day when it's yours, you know, I mean, that was quite a big learning experience. The actual physical skill of just making a decent cup of coffee, you know, was an actual skill to learn. I don't drink coffee actually. So, you know, so I was making it. It was like, can you try, is this okay? You know, and just actually learning how to make a good cup of coffee. And I think also for Khalid and I, just learning, you know, we're lucky we get on very well, but just learning how to work together, you know, what our strengths are, not trying to control everything ourselves, but just giving the other one space, you know, to do their own bit, you know, and it was things. And we do actually fall into quite a good divide, as in Khalid's really into the coffee. He's got a degree in accountancy, so he's doing what I think is all the boring bits, you know, the books, the money, you know, all of that side of it. And then I'm much more the sort of front facing, the social media, you know, all of that aspect, which he doesn't enjoy. So it's, from our point of view, it works quite well, but it's just trying to let go of those other bits and admit that you don't know everything about that aspect of the business.
Yeah, like there's some really important messages there, I think, because, like, you know, the first thing I think there is enjoy working with people that you enjoy working with, if you see what I mean. But secondly, that division of who does what, and it's you know, it's particularly, you know, and by the way, I work with my wife as well, so
okay,
we've got a sort of similar sort of experience there, but it actually, it's also the case in other businesses as well, of having absolute clarity on who does what. Yeah, of actually sort of saying, okay, well, that's your job, that's my job, I'm taking responsibility for that, you're taking responsibility for this. And it's probably more so important when you're working with a partner or a friend or something like that, because there's this sort of thought process that, well, we don't have to put that in place because we just know how we work together. But it's probably more important to have that in place and say, right, okay, what's the division of responsibilities? And how do you find, you know, working with your husband, how do you find the balance of having the business but also separating that from your you know, your personal life?
Yeah, we're not very good at that yet. Okay. You know, I mean, we were saying the other week we need to try and just make sure at least one day we do nothing to do with the bit, you know, because we're open 4 days a week at the moment. You know, the other 3 days we're always doing something to do with the business, and we need to at least take one of those days and just say, no, you know, let's go off and do something, you know, just have a day when we're not even thinking about it. And so I'm not going to beat ourselves up about the fact that it's not happening yet, because it's still an early doors business for us, and so there are aspects of it that we're still catching up with. But I think in a month or something, we'll, you know, it will be really important that we just make a division and we don't always talk about work.
Yeah, and I make you right there, Caroline. I mean, it's yeah. Look, when you're setting up a business in the early stage of the business, it's rolling up the sleeves, getting involved. But yeah, to have that plan to say, right, after X period of time, we want to spend X time together, not talking about business. Right,
Yeah.
that gives you something to work towards. And then if you're not achieving that, if that doesn't happen, then you need to revisit things and say, well, why isn't it happening? What do we need to change to make it happen? And also, is this business therefore giving us what we want?
Yeah.
Because the idea was that enjoy life. I'll give you
Absolutely.
I'll give you a tip here. It's one of the things that myself and my wife put in place was we made a rule that we couldn't talk about business outside of the office.
Okay.
So if we wanted to talk about business, we could only do that in the office.
Yeah.
When we were outside the office, we couldn't do that.
Yeah, it's a good
That
plan.
was a rule that we sort of set in place, so that one didn't encroach on the other. So let's delve into things a little bit more deeply here. So what have you learned about yourself, Caroline, in the last sort of 6 weeks or so that you've been running the business?
Oh, I'm more of a control freak than I realized.
Okay.
I'm more sort of, I want to know everything. So that was sort of interesting, sort of stepping back from that bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was probably the biggest lesson. And yeah, I mean, things like dealing with people, I've sort of been doing it all my working life, so I'm quite comfortable with just dealing with people on a day-to-day basis. But there is that sort of, there's also that nervous side of, is that cup of coffee right? Is that sandwich as good as it can be? Things like that. So yes. And I've also realized that actually I need to get work fit.
Right, okay.
Come home, both of us come home at the end of the day. I think we tend to be asleep on the sofa by about 8 o'clock.
Right, yeah.
It's but again, it's just getting used to. We've got a young dog. I walk a lot, but it's completely different to actually be standing there, in the cafe all day and come home and it's just like, on the sofa.
Yes, no, that's a fairly common thing. Yeah, you've got to get, and again, look, you're 6 weeks in. It's about getting that balance right, in terms of how you structure your day, how you structure your time, and what have you noticed that perhaps that you've needed to learn or you needed to develop? Is there anything that you've realised yourself? Well, actually, that's an area that I need to develop myself, other than being work fit. But
not that I mean, I'm sure there's a lot, but I suppose some of it is things like working out costings, how to extend the menu, but keep it. We have very little waste. Okay. I would love to start doing things like salads and things like that, but at the same time, to begin with, I know that there will be quite a lot of waste involved, and I don't want that to happen. So it's things like that, and then it's being, so things like the savory cheesecake that we introduced. The first week, we didn't sell very much of it, and then it slowly grew. And it's just being able to hold your nerve. And if you introduce something new, just accept that it's going to take a few weeks for it to kick in.
Yeah, okay.
So, it's things like that I do need to learn more on. But we're lucky, we've got a great baker that works with us. And so, he's been there for about 5 years.
Right, okay.
So it's not me having to do, all the food.
So there's that. I guess what I've sort of picked up from that is perhaps a little bit of just patience in terms of saying, okay, yeah, look, this isn't going to happen overnight. We need to, we need to work on this, and it's But also, I guess the other thing that's linked into that is also having that ability to make that decision of saying, right, we've tried this, we've given it a go. actually, no, we've got to change our tact,
Yeah.
or in using your savoury cheesecake, right, we're giving it a go. It has worked great, let's stick with it. Or it hasn't worked, right, what do we do now? Do we change it? Do we tweak it? Did we
Absolutely.
market it right? Did we promote it enough? Those type of things.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the other thing that always amazes me is that there seems to be no rhyme or reason to what sells one week to the next.
Right,
So,
okay.
things like last week, suddenly everybody was having their drinks with coconut milk.
Right, okay.
And we'd hardly sold any coconut milk, the odd one or two. But then suddenly last week, I think 50% of the people probably were saying, can I have it with coconut milk? And then over the weekend, suddenly everybody wanted hot chocolate. and that I don't understand. Why are these sudden, like, everybody wants something specific? It's not that we've posted anything.
Yeah.
Maybe there's something in the media, or, I don't know.
Possibly so. I mean, I guess everybody wanted a hot chocolate, bearing in mind the weather that we had at the weekend. But
yes, yesterday was quite nice here, and there was, loads of people. So I don't get it.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's sometimes there isn't any rhyme or reason, and you just have to go with the flow. So
yeah, and be prepared.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So what would you say to anyone thinking about going into business, Caroline? What would you?
Oh, do it.
Okay, yeah. Like it.
Don't listen to everybody. Just follow your dreams, follow your heart, follow your instinct. Trust yourself. Do it.
Great advice. I like that. So just do it. Follow your instincts, trust your heart, and just do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And work out what the worst thing that's going to happen. I think that was a real sort of security blanket almost. It's like, look, what's the worst thing that's going to happen?
Yeah.
And other than maybe a bit of reputation and as in personal reputation of got a battering or something, but you just have to go for it.
I think in life there's I look at three categories of things. There's things that you can't control. There's things that you can influence, and then there's things that you can control.
Yeah.
So actually, don't worry about the things that you can't control. Focus on the things.
What Khalid says all the time.
There you go. And it's focusing on those things. COVID was a prime example. We couldn't control COVID, and to be honest, to a certain extent, we couldn't even influence it really, because we could, you can lobby the government or whatever, but we could influence it by having the vaccinations and all that sort of thing. But actually, majority of that was out of our control. So it's actually, well, look, focus on what you can control, which again takes us back to that above and below the point of power.
Yeah.
Taking accountability and taking responsibility. So a question that I always like to ask everybody that I speak to, Caroline, is what's the best advice that you would give an 18-year-old you? So if you could go back to when you were 18, what advice would you give yourself?
Learn how to communicate with people, learn how to talk to people. Wow. I think that's such an important skill for people to have, is that confidence of being able, to talk to somebody that comes up to a counter or orders a cup of coffee or you bump into in the street. I think those softer skills, communication, it's what gets a lot of people their jobs.
Yeah.
And I think for most people who are starting out, they're going to go into a company or a business or whatever, and they're not going to know how it's run. They're not going to have the skills that they need for the job, but they can be taught. But those softer skills, learning how to ask something if you don't know, admit that you've got something wrong, I think those are the skills that it's really good for people to learn as early as possible.
I 100% agree with you there. And it's funny, I have a similar conversation. I've got two daughters, 14 and 17. And actually, that's one of the things that I say to them about, communication skills are all important. But actually, that goes I think it's a great bit of advice because it goes throughout your career, whether you're an employee or an employer, a business owner, a leader. You know, being a leader, you've got to have great communication skills. All the great leaders had great communication skills.
Yeah.
So I think communication skills are a fantastic thing. So I think that's a great bit of advice to give an 18-year-old.
Good.
So Caroline, look, I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with me today and sharing
Pleasure.
more
Thank you
about
very
your
much.
business and your journey. And I wish you every success with Cake Room Hastings. I'm sure it's going to be absolutely fantastic, and you're going to make a great success of it. So
Thank you very much.
okay, nice speaking to you.
And you, thanks. Bye.